Welcome back to the channel. Today we have Theresa from JesterBell YouTube, and we're going to talk a little bit about Harley Quinn, the animated series. Most people thought this was on the chopping block. We had the culling going on from David Zaslav and HBO Max. The assumption was that Harley Quinn was going away, but that is not so. How are you doing today, Theresa?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm actually not a big fan of the Harley Quinn show. I was telling you before, there's things that I appreciated about it when it started. I'm very happy that I just did a sales video, which I talked about a little bit on my channel. It's doing very well. Thank you for shouting it out. So this, yeah, I too thought that this show would be on the chopping block because especially with how HBO Max is treating animation. But first of all, I looked into it a little bit more and I thought a little bit more about it. And first of all, apparently a lot of the things that HBO Max is chopping are things that they can get money back from. Batgirl, they could get money back from that movie by canceling it. They can't do that with The Flash. So no matter what the PR situation is with The Flash, they want that movie to happen. With this show, it apparently, like if this show was eligible for a tax write-off, then it wouldn't be airing as we speak. They would have just said, okay, cancel everything we have. Just let it sit somewhere. Let us take this tax refund. But everything I'm reading about it says that this season 4 for Harley Quinn was going to happen all along. And they haven't said that officially, but a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, there was a leak and apparently all the titles for season 4 were written out like right before this show came out on HBO Max, this season 3. And so they had a map for season 4. They don't even have that for the Kite Man show yet. It had a 2023 release date, and the showrunners have confirmed that this season 4 is coming out pretty soon, which you have to think animation takes a long time. It took them 2 years to get to this season 3. It took them over 2 years to get the first 2 seasons out. And also, this is a very obscure reference, but I had an acting class last year, and my acting teacher actually, it was back like late in the winter, and he actually went up for the role of the Flash in the show. And I haven't even seen of that character yet. So, and I was like, why are they recording that show still so late? Like it's supposed to come out next year. So like that's some evidence, like it hasn't been officially announced that that's what happened, but that's what appears to have happened, that they got dual renewed like they did for their first season. They got 26 episodes. They split into 2 seasons. This appears like it could be 20 episodes split into 2 seasons. So that's kind of what's happening. It's like it hasn't necessarily gotten renewed just now as it's, this was always going to happen and they're always just getting it out there. Just like I think that Titans and Doom Patrol, those shows probably don't have a tax write-off that they can do. So at the very least, we're going to get the seasons of those shows that were promised.
Yeah, the stuff that's already been paid for. What's interesting is the showrunner before this, Patrick Schumacker, has said if they ever try to break up Harlivy, they'd have to drag him away, kicking and screaming. He's not the showrunner anymore. He and Justin Halpern have been replaced. Sarah Peters, who has written a little bit on the show, and I think she was a consultant. Mm-hmm. Does this mean we have the end of Harlivy as we know it? Are they going to break him up?
I'm not sure about that. That went into my head because I'm like, right when Patrick Schumacker said that like a couple weeks ago, now he's going off the show. I'm like, it didn't seem like he was going to, and it could be reading into things that aren't there. Like I said, if these episodes are already really far away in production already, then there might not be that much of a chance to like change it. Could be because he's busy with other things. It could be because they're cutting costs. And I heard a story that was leaked out that the original showrunners actually overspent on their first 2 seasons. So it could be that they're not budgeting very well for this show. And they're like, okay, let's go to one showrunner, let's cut costs and let's make this still happen. So that could be it. I do think that the Harlivy relationship has been one of the biggest detriments to the show. I don't agree with the direction of let's make Harley become a girl power character. Let's make her be a character about personal growth, because I don't think that's who she is. But if you're going to do that, then commit to it. And they, at least for their first season, like they actually developed it. They gave it time. They let her fail and they let her like come out of it for a while. Then this is what happens whenever they make Harley solo. They run out of things to do with her. They kind of make her bounce from one thing to the next. And now, as of season 3, they've kind of made her character become all about the fact that she loves Poison Ivy and she wants to do anything for Poison Ivy. And I'm like, well, you've kind of taken her full circle. Like you were all about making her an individual and getting her out from the Joker. And now you've just made her become about Poison Ivy. And they're doing that. And this happens to a lot of shows where they get into a trap where there will be a fan base for a certain relationship on the internet that'll be very, very vocal. And the showrunners will think, oh, we better cater to this fan base because that's what they want. And then they'll make it all about that relationship. But not everyone wants to see that, really. And that's like season 3 has a lot of complaints over it. I've been seeing that people don't want it to be all about that relationship. And they don't think that it's as funny. They think that the characters are becoming more annoying and shallow, in part because of that. And so I think it would save the show if they moved on from that relationship. But here's the thing, the fan base around Harlivy, I'm not the only one who thinks it. They're some of the most vicious people, actually. Like
Crazy.
they will lose their mind. They were sending death threats to the showrunners over not doing them immediately. They were sending it to them over the Kite Man. They were so upset over the Kite Man relationship. It was the worst thing in the world. And I remember it was Justin Halpern who did a Q&A on Reddit. He actually asked them in the Q&A, like, I'm going to do the relationship. Can you please not send me death threats over it anymore? And so you can see them kind of walking on eggshells in the show. Like they don't want to address any major conflicts between the relationship. They can't have Ivy ever tell Harley that she's being too annoying and too smothering because that would threaten their relationship, that it's perfect. So they're sort of talking down to their audience in the very show to be like, don't worry, they're not going to break up. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Don't be mad at us.
You know what's weird about Harley Quinn is, she's supposed to be a really big, important character, one of the most popular female characters in all of comic books. But if you go to the movies, if you go to this animated series, you go to the comic books, multiple comic books, it's a different version of Harley Quinn in every single one of them.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like they have no idea what they want to do with the character. Most of the Harley Quinn fans I know would like to just see a return to the original character in the jester costume with the hammer and saying Mr. J and Puddin' and stuff like that. But they can't go back to that. But they have no idea where they want to actually take the character. We even have writers, you were talking earlier about Stephanie Phillips, essentially chastising the fans of the character, saying, stop asking for this. Like, you're the bad guy here, when she started writing the comic series.
Well, yeah, that happened in annual 2021 of the Harley Quinn solo by Stephanie Phillips. She made a villain named Keepsake. And he was very obviously supposed to be a caricature, like a negative caricature of someone who misses villain Harley. He was like, talking to Harley about how she was so much better as a villain and how he wants to force her back into the jester suit. He even threw out a suggestion of, oh, you should be the leader of your own team as a villain to challenge the Joker. And I've heard someone say that, like on Twitter, on the internet, saying like, well, if they're so afraid of putting her back with Joker, at least make her a villain who's like rivals him. And so I'm like, I'm pretty sure she took that fan's suggestion and just like made them into the villain here. But I'm like, and I know that this is not Stephanie Phillips making these decisions with the character. Like, she just has to obey what editorial wants. And she was kind of venting there, I think. But I'm reviewing her comic right now, and I'm like, I can go back even to some mediocre comics from Harley in the past, and I can say, look, these were actually better written because they were. So it's like, don't bash the fans for wanting something that actually was better. And in terms of her being all over the place in comics and media, I honestly think Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner started that precedent where they completely remade the character into anything they wanted to make their book work. And I think that set the precedent going forward, where everybody is like, well, I can just remake this character into whatever suits me. And like, you have to do anything but go back to the original, so that you have writers like Rob Williams who turned her into a completely different character to fit his Suicide Squad book. You have the writers of this cartoon show who have turned her into something different to fit their vision. And so, but that's what's frustrating. That's why in my last review, I said, if I were the comic writers and editors right now, I would go back. Like, even there are some writers and artists who know the original voice for the character, like Joe Quinones. He wrote an issue for Black, White, and Red. He wrote a very good issue, and it was just fun, but he had their voice back. I'm like, I'd read a series from Joe Quinones. I mean, he's more of an artist. He's probably a little bit too expensive. He probably can't be writing and drawing the book like that. But I'm like, you have people out there who remember the voice of the character. You're just not going to them. You're just letting people do whatever else.
Have you read the Harley Quinn animated series comic book from T. Franklin? That's the worst thing that's come out of this damn animated show. Thing.
Yeah, I agree that is the worst comic, bar none, that I've ever read with Harley Quinn's name printed on it. The only thing that makes me feel better is pretty much everyone, I think, has acknowledged, yeah, that's not even the voices of the characters from the show. And it was very provocative. And I think at least the first issue, like, it sold because it was a provocative comic and everyone was talking about it because of how, how sexualized it was and all that. And so T. Franklin is continuing to get work from it. I don't think that there's been as much of a buzz over her one shot she drew, but that was like definitely the worst thing I've ever seen come out of this ordeal. And I don't think that comic would have ever been released under Dan Didio. As much as I'm a critic of Dan Didio and the decisions he made, I don't think that he would have ever released that comic. But there's been other comics like that I've seen where there's just things inserted from that are just like, no one wants to read that. When I'm like, why isn't there someone at editorial saying, don't put that in this comic? We can't release this. It's like, there's not a lot of leadership over there right now.
Yeah. Well, Jim Lee's supposed to be the guy that's overseeing like all the characters and making sure their voices are correct, but he must not be a Harley Quinn fan because that character is all over the place. You are a big Harley Quinn fan. You've been reviewing the comic books on BatmanNews.com. Congratulations on your work there. Obviously, you've been watching the animated show. Is there any final words that you have about Harley Quinn, kind of the state of the character right now and what we're going to get moving forward?
Well, just that there are some things that are making me a little hopeful again. Like they're doing, I know it sounds crazy, but I was not into this, like the idea of a sequel to the Joker movie. But they say that Lady Gaga is actually a good actress. She's a singer, but she's also a good actress. She's not like Madonna, who can't act at all. And she's going to allegedly be playing the character or a version of the character in this Joker sequel. And I've been reading things like it's going to be set in Arkham Asylum. It's going to be a more serious artistic take. And even though they say it's going to be a musical, I'm like, well, I'd be kind of interested in that just because it's sort of like the Black Label comics where your alternate universes are more similar to the character I like than the main one. But then again, there's also things like the Joker and Batman Deadly Duo comic that Harley's supposed to be in. And whenever she's in a Black Label comic, it usually turns out. I don't know how long she's going to appear in the comic, but there are some things I'm looking forward to. And there's rumors that there's going to be a version of the character in the Matt Reeves universe. That's all a little up in the air right now because of the situation with David Zaslav. But so there's things. And with ultimately, at least when you get into the movies, they like making money. The direction that Margot Robbie took her with Birds of Prey and that did not make money. And so at the very least, I think that the movies probably have some hope for change. The last thing I would say with the show is like, I could appreciate elements about it, but I ultimately do not see Harley Quinn as this raunchy, swearing, R-rated character. And that started to be weirdly brought over into the comics briefly with James Tynion. It was like he was trying to make her swear a lot, but he couldn't. So he's putting a lot of like stars and symbols there. And I'm like, if that show is going to exist still, and I don't know how long it will, I don't know if this will be the last season or what, leave that in its own corner because not everyone wants to read that. And don't make the character swear constantly if you can't actually do it. It's a little ridiculous.
Once again, I want to say thank you very much to Theresa from JesterBell YouTube. Recently, she had an amazing video talking about the comic book sales of Harley Quinn, really going back and doing a lot of research, analysis, pointing out some facts. If you haven't seen this video, definitely check this one out. If you would like to meet Pegleg Beyonce, T. Franklin's self-insert character in the Harley Quinn animated series like comic books, definitely check this one out. I talked about that. It was absolutely terrible. And if you're on a mobile device, there's a link in the video description.